In the glittering skyline of Doha, where glass towers pierce the desert sky, a different kind of power resides. Far from the dust and rubble of Gaza, the political leadership of Hamas has found a sanctuary. This is not a rugged hideout or a secret bunker, but a world of five-star hotels, luxury villas, diplomatic receptions. Qatar, a tiny but immensely wealthy Gulf emirate, has for years rolled out the red carpet for the leaders of an organization that Israel, the United States, and the European Union designate as a terrorist group. This hospitality has transformed Doha into the de facto external headquarters of Hamas, a critical hub for its political strategy, international fundraising, and global communications, all conducted under the watchful and seemingly permissive eye of the Qatari monarchy. This arrangement is a paradox wrapped in geopolitical complexity. On one hand, Qatar presents itself as a key mediator in the Middle East, a neutral ground where adversaries can talk. The presence of Hamas leaders like Ismail Haniyeh and Khaled Mashal is framed as part of this role, allowing Doha to act as a crucial back-channel during ceasefire negotiations and prisoner exchanges with Israel. Yet, this open-door policy provides Hamas with something far more valuable than a negotiating platform. It grants the group an unparalleled level of international legitimacy and a secure base of operations, shielding its leadership from the immediate threats they would face in Gaza or the West Bank, where the Israeli military and intelligence services operate with near total freedom. For Israel, this situation is more than just a diplomatic headache, it is a profound and festering security threat. The leaders enjoying Qatari protection are not merely retired politicians, they are the architects of Hamas's long-term strategy. From their comfortable Doha offices, they are believed to direct fundraising networks that channel millions of dollars into the organization's coffers, money that Israel insists is used to finance the activities of its military wing. They orchestrate international propaganda campaigns, meet with foreign dignitaries, and maintain the ideological fervor that fuels the conflict, all while remaining physically untouchable by Israeli forces. This gilded cage in Doha is, in the eyes of Israeli intelligence, the nerve center of the enemy. Israel's intense focus on Hamas's presence in Doha stems from a clear and pragmatic assessment of the threat. The leaders based in Qatar are not just figureheads, they are the strategic brain of the organization. While the military commanders in Gaza are responsible for tactical operations on the ground, launching rockets, digging tunnels, planning attacks, the political bureau in Doha is tasked with the grand strategy. They are the ones who engage in diplomacy, cultivate relationships with Iran and Turkey, and most critically, manage the vast financial empire that keeps the Hamas war machine running. This division of labor makes the Doha leadership a high-value target for Israel, as neutralizing them could disrupt the entire organizational structure. The financial aspect is perhaps the most significant concern for Israeli intelligence agencies like the Mossad and Shin Bet. Hamas requires a constant flow of funds to pay its fighters, procure and manufacture weapons, and maintain its civil governance in Gaza. Qatar itself is a major financial donor to Gaza, providing hundreds of millions of dollars in aid, which it claims is for humanitarian purposes and civil servant salaries. However, Israel has long alleged that the lines are blurry and that funds are inevitably diverted to Hamas's military wing. The Hamas leadership in Doha is perfectly positioned to oversee these complex financial networks, using formal banking systems and informal Hawala networks, making their disruption a paramount objective for Israel. Furthermore, the legitimacy that Qatar bestows upon Hamas is a major strategic threat to Israel. By hosting its political leaders and allowing them to operate openly, Doha effectively normalizes Hamas on the international stage. When foreign officials meet with Ismail Haniyeh in a Doha hotel, it elevates him from the leader of a designated terrorist group to a political statesman. This undermines Israel's decades-long effort to isolate Hamas diplomatically and financially. It creates a narrative where Hamas is seen as a legitimate political actor and a key player in the Palestinian national movement, a narrative that Israel vehemently rejects and actively works to counter through its own diplomatic channels and public relations campaigns. The relationship between Israel, Hamas, and Qatar is a complex tapestry woven over decades of shifting alliances and pragmatic interests in the Middle East. Qatar's involvement with Hamas began to deepen in the early 2000s, but the Arab Spring in 2011 cemented Doha's role as the group's primary patron. When Hamas leadership under Khaled Mashal fled Damascus during the Syrian civil war, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani welcomed them. It was part of Qatar's strategy to support Islamist movements across the region, including the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas's ideological offshoot, positioning Doha as a power broker. For a time, Israel tacitly accepted this, preferring Hamas leadership concentrated in a country that allowed quiet back channels. Qatar acted as intermediary for messages, negotiated prisoner swaps, notably the 2011 Gilad Shalit deal, and helped manage de-escalations. Qatari funding for Gaza, viewed with suspicion, was also seen as preventing humanitarian collapse in the Strip, a fragile balance to avoid greater chaos. Tolerance eroded as Hamas's military capabilities grew and attacks became more sophisticated. Wars in 2012, 2014, and 2021 showed Hamas's rising strength, aided in part by Doha's support. Israeli frustration grew, seeing Qatar less as mediator and more as a state sponsor. Hamas thanking Qatari hosts on Al Jazeera while Israeli cities faced rocket fire intensified pressure on Israeli leaders. Today there's deep Israeli distrust of Qatar coupled with reluctant dependence on its go-between role. Publicly, Israel condemns Qatar and calls for expulsions. Covertly, Israeli intelligence still uses Qatari channels while trying to monitor and undermine Hamas. The history makes any action against Hamas in Qatar laden with political and strategic risk, one of the most sensitive fronts in the shadow war. Disrupting Hamas activities in a sovereign state like Qatar, which maintains delicate security ties with the West, requires a sophisticated and multi-layered intelligence approach. For Israel, this task falls primarily to the Mossad, its foreign intelligence agency, renowned for its global reach and human intelligence capabilities. The first layer of this effort involves cultivating sources within or close to the Hamas leadership in Doha. This is an exceptionally difficult task, as Hamas is a tight-knit and paranoid organization, highly suspicious of outsiders. Mossad case officers would seek to recruit disgruntled aides, financial couriers, or even family members by exploiting vulnerabilities such as greed, ideology, personal grievances, or blackmail. A second critical layer is signals intelligence, managed by the elite Unit 8200 of the Israeli military. In the modern era, this is arguably as important as human sources. Israeli intelligence relentlessly works to intercept the communications of Hamas leaders in Doha. This includes monitoring their phone calls, hacking their emails, and tracking their digital footprint across social media and encrypted messaging apps. The goal is not just to listen in on conversations about operational plans, but to map out their financial networks, identify key personnel, and understand their strategic thinking. The challenge is immense, as Hamas is well aware of these surveillance efforts and constantly updates its security protocols, often resorting to face-to-face meetings and trusted couriers for its most sensitive communications. Financial intelligence is another key pillar of Israel's strategy. A specialized unit within the Mossad, known as Zomet, works in concert with the Economic Warfare Division to track the flow of money to Hamas. This involves monitoring bank transfers, infiltrating shell companies, and tracking cryptocurrency transactions that Hamas uses to bypass the international banking system. The intelligence gathered is then used to disrupt these financial channels, often by sharing information with allied nations, particularly the United States Treasury Department, which can then impose sanctions on banks, charities, or individuals involved in financing Hamas. The goal is to starve the organization of the funds it needs to operate, making the Doha hub less effective. One of the most dramatic incidents of Israeli action targeting a Hamas leader, widely reported at the time, occurred before the Doha era and set the precedent for the risks involved. This was the infamous 1997 assassination attempt on Khaled Mashal, then head of Hamas's Jordan-based political bureau. On the streets of Amman, a Mossad team posed as Canadian tourists, ambushed Mashal and sprayed a fast-acting poison into his ear. The operation was meant to be clean and deniable, a silent execution that would leave no trace. But the plan went disastrously wrong. Mashal's bodyguards chased them down and captured 2 Israeli agents. The botched attempt triggered a massive diplomatic crisis between Israel and Jordan, which had a peace treaty. King Hussein demanded Israel provide the antidote or risk the treaty's collapse and execution of the agents. Netanyahu, who had authorized the operation, was forced into a humiliating capitulation. He sent the head of Mossad to Amman with the antidote, which ultimately saved Mashal's life. Israel also released dozens of Palestinian prisoners, including Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. The failure was a strategic disaster. It elevated Mashal's status and deeply embarrassed the Mossad. Though it happened in Jordan, its lessons echo for any Israeli action in Qatar today. The Mashal affair showed that operating in a friendly Arab country carries immense risks. A failed operation can unravel years of diplomacy, endanger intelligence assets, and result in severe political blowback. Qatar lacks a formal peace treaty with Israel, yet it maintains important indirect ties and hosts the US's largest regional military base. An operation in Doha gone wrong could devastate Israel-Qatar relations and damage Israel's strategic alliance with Washington. The Amman legacy is a constant cautionary tale inside Israeli intelligence, a reminder how quickly shadow wars can ignite full international crises. In the 21st century conflict, the most significant battles are often fought not with bullets, but with bytes. Israel, a global cyberpower, has increasingly turned to its formidable cyber capabilities to counter Hamas's activities in Doha. This digital warfare is conducted far from the public eye, primarily by Unit 8200 and the Mossad's cyber divisions. Their objectives are threefold: surveillance, disruption, psychological warfare. The first step is always surveillance, which involves penetrating the digital lives of Hamas leaders and operatives. This means hacking into their personal computers, mobile phones, email accounts. That provides access to their plans, communications, financial records, giving a real-time intelligence feed on their activities. Beyond simple eavesdropping, Israel engages in active disruption. For instance, cyber operatives might manipulate financial data to sow confusion within Hamas's fundraising networks, causing payments to be misdirected or blocked. They could launch denial-of-service attacks against websites and online platforms used by Hamas for propaganda and recruitment, taking them offline at critical moments. A more sophisticated operation might involve planting false information within Hamas's communication channels, designed to create distrust and paranoia among its leadership. The goal is to make the digital environment a hostile and unreliable space for Hamas, hampering its ability to command and control its assets from the safety of Doha. Another key aspect of these covert ops is targeting the infrastructure that supports Hamas. This includes Hamas's digital assets and the Qatari infrastructure they might be using. A direct, large-scale cyber attack on Qatari government or financial systems would be incredibly risky and likely cross a red line for the United States. Smaller, more targeted operations are plausible. The psychological dimension of these operations is also crucial. By demonstrating an ability to penetrate Hamas's most secure communications, Israel sends a powerful message: you are never truly safe. A subtle but unmistakable sign of a breach can create deep-seated paranoia within the organization, turning their gilded cage in Doha into a prison of suspicion. Any Israeli action against Hamas in Qatar, covert or overt, requires navigating a treacherous diplomatic landscape. The primary risk is a severe rupture in relations with Qatar itself. While Israel and Qatar do not have formal diplomatic ties, they have maintained a complex and often functional back-channel relationship for years. This channel has been instrumental in mediating ceasefires, facilitating humanitarian aid to Gaza, and securing the release of Israeli captives. A direct Israeli strike or a discovered covert operation on Qatari soil would shatter this fragile understanding, likely leading Qatar to cease all mediation efforts and potentially adopt a more openly hostile posture toward Israel. The fallout would extend far beyond bilateral relations with Qatar. The United States, Israel's most important ally, has a massive strategic interest in Qatar's stability. The Al Udeid Air Base, located just outside Doha, is the forward headquarters of United States Central Command, and is indispensable for American military operations across the Middle East. Any Israeli action that destabilizes Qatar or embarrasses its leadership would be viewed with extreme displeasure in Washington. The United States would likely exert immense pressure on Israel to stand down, as it values its strategic partnership with Qatar and its role in regional security. An unauthorized Israeli operation could provoke a genuine crisis in United States-Israel relations. Furthermore, a strike in Qatar would risk alienating other Gulf Arab states with which Israel has been carefully building relationships. The Abraham Accords normalized relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. These states, while rivals of Qatar in some respects, would be deeply unsettled by an Israeli military or intelligence operation in a fellow GCC member state. It would be seen as a violation of sovereignty and a dangerously destabilizing act, potentially causing these new partners to distance themselves from Israel, chilling the prospects for further normalization with Saudi Arabia. Finally, there is the risk of escalation with Hamas and its allies. An assassination of a high-profile leader on foreign soil would be seen as a major provocation, and Hamas would be under immense pressure to retaliate forcefully. The potential for a targeted operation to spiral into a full-blown regional conflict is a powerful deterrent, forcing Israeli decision-makers to weigh the tactical gain against the strategic risk of a much wider war. Recognizing the immense risks of direct military or covert action, Israel has increasingly focused on a sophisticated campaign of public and diplomatic pressure to squeeze Hamas's lifeline in Qatar. This strategy is less about kinetic strikes and more about making the cost of hosting Hamas prohibitively high for the Qataris. A central pillar is public diplomacy, or hasbara. Israeli officials, from the prime minister down to ambassadors in key Western capitals, consistently use public platforms to condemn Qatar's role. They give interviews, write op-eds, and deliver speeches that frame Qatar not as a mediator but as a patron of terror, aiming to tarnish Qatar's carefully curated international image. Backed by intensive behind-the-scenes diplomatic efforts, particularly in Washington, D.C. Israeli diplomats and lobbyists work to influence American lawmakers, think tanks, and administration officials. They present classified intelligence briefings detailing Hamas's activities in Doha and linking Qatari support to specific terrorist acts. The goal: persuade the United States government to use its leverage over Qatar, as its security guarantor, to force a change in policy. The message is simple. A country hosting a major U.S. military base can't be a sanctuary for a U.S.-designated terrorist group. This creates a diplomatic predicament for Qatar, caught between regional ambitions and reliance on American protection. Financial pressure is another critical tool. Israel's economic warfare units work closely with the United States Treasury and other international bodies to expose and sanction the financial networks Hamas operates through Doha. By publicly designating individuals, charities, and financial facilitators based in the Gulf, they increase compliance risks for international banks dealing with Qatar. This forces Qatari financial institutions to be more cautious, making it harder for Hamas to move money. Finally, Israel leverages intelligence as diplomatic currency. By sharing intelligence with other concerned countries, Israel builds a coalition of quiet partners who can exert pressure on Qatar. This multi-pronged pressure campaign is a long game. It lacks the drama of covert ops but is a safer and potentially more sustainable strategy for compelling Qatar to rethink hosting Hamas's leadership on its soil. The clandestine struggle between Israel and Hamas in the seemingly tranquil setting of Doha is a microcosm of the modern Middle East, a conflict fought not on traditional battlefields but in the shadows of diplomacy, finance, and cyberspace. This cat-and-mouse game is destined to continue, shaped by the shifting sands of regional politics and technological advancement. For Israel, the Hamas leadership in Qatar will remain a top-tier intelligence priority. The perceived injustice of Hamas leaders directing a war from a position of luxury and safety ensures that the political pressure to act will never fully dissipate. The Doha problem will remain a permanent fixture in the briefing rooms of the Mossad and the Israeli military headquarters in Tel Aviv. The future of these covert operations will likely see an even greater emphasis on non-kinetic methods, while the allure of a decisive strike against a top leader will always exist. The diplomatic risks of operating in Qatar are simply too high, and will likely grow as Qatar's global importance rises. Therefore, Israel will continue to invest heavily in its cyber warfare and financial tracking capabilities. The goal will be to make life for the Hamas leadership in Doha untenable, not by physical threat, but by constant digital surveillance, financial strangulation, and psychological pressure. The aim is to isolate them, disrupt their command, and render their safe haven ineffective. For its part, Hamas will continue to adapt. Aware they are under constant surveillance, leaders will evolve communication methods and financial routes, seeking more secure technologies and more clandestine ways to move money. They'll try to deepen integration within Qatar, making action against them even more diplomatically sensitive.
They'll use Doha to wage a global PR battle to present themselves as statesmen and freedom fighters.
Countering Israel's narrative. Their survival depends on outmaneuvering Israeli intelligence in this high-stakes contest. Ultimately, the future of this conflict is tied to the broader political landscape. Until a fundamental resolution arrives, the silent war will persist. The gleaming towers of Doha will continue to cast long shadows, and within them the unending game of espionage and intrigue will play on, far from headlines, but at the heart of the region's future.